He walked along the quiet streets of the neighborhood, his hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the surroundings. The evening sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement. The distant sound of children playing echoed faintly from the schoolyard. He had walked this route countless times before, but tonight felt different. There was an unease in the air, a sense that something was wrong. Though he could not yet put his finger on it, a small figure appeared ahead, barely more than a shadow against the fading light. She was walking fast, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her head down, as if she wanted the world to ignore her. He slowed his pace, careful not to startle her, yet staying close enough to watch. It was the way she held herself that caught his attention, not timid exactly, but wary, cautious, like someone carrying a weight too heavy for a child her age. He remembered when he first noticed her. Weeks ago in the local park. She had been sitting alone on a bench, drawing something in a notebook, her eyes darting around every few seconds, as if expecting trouble. A group of older children had approached, laughing and mocking her for no reason he could understand. She had tried to stand her ground, but her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the wind. Something inside him had stirred then, a sense that she should not have to face that kind of fear alone. Now, seeing her again, he felt the same pull. He adjusted his coat and kept pace, making sure he stayed a few steps behind. Never too close, but never leaving her out of sight. He had learned to be careful. Intervening in these situations required timing, understanding, and patience. Rush in too soon, and you could make things worse. Wait too long, and you might be too late. He had learned to read the small signs, the twitch of a shoulder, the quick glance over the shoulder. The way a child's hands clenched tight as he walked. He remembered the first time he had spoken to her. She had been sitting under a tree after school, tears silently running down her cheeks. The remnants of a sandwich forgotten on the grass beside her. He had crouched down, careful not to loom over her, and said softly, "Are you okay?" She had looked up, startled, eyes wide, unsure if she should be frightened or grateful. "I'm fine," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice told another story. He had nodded, pretending to look at something on the ground. "Okay. Just so you know, if anyone bothers you, I'm around. You don't have to face it alone." She had blinked at him, unsure how to respond. Then, with a cautious smile, she had returned to her notebook, drawing something new, though the lines were shakier than before. He had watched for a few moments, then left, giving her space. That was the beginning of something small, something unspoken, but important. A trust, fragile and delicate, was slowly forming. Tonight the boy who had walked ahead turned sharply into an alleyway. The man hesitated for a split second before following. He could hear laughter, mean rough laughter, the kind that made his stomach tighten. A group of children had cornered her. He slowed, watching from a distance, waiting for the right moment. They were pushing her, snatching her bag, pulling at her coat. She struggled but was outnumbered, her voice almost drowned by the others. Something inside him snapped. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Hey, leave her alone." The group froze, turning toward him. For a moment, he felt the adrenaline spike, that old rush that came with confrontation. But he kept his voice even, steady, unwavering. "Back off. Now." The older kids hesitated. They weren't sure if he was someone to be feared or ignored. He didn't raise his hand, didn't step aggressively. He just stood there, calm, unwavering. Slowly muttering under their breath, they let go of her bag and backed away. The girl looked at him, wide-eyed, unsure if she should cry, thank him, or run. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I think so." He helped her pick up her things, brushing off the dirt from her coat. She glanced at him, and for the first time that evening there was a hint of relief in her eyes. She had someone watching her, someone who cared, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. The walk home was quiet. She walked close enough to feel safe, but not so close that she felt trapped. He matched her pace, occasionally pointing out small things along the street, a cat slinking across a fence, the way the light hit a cracked window in a funny pattern. She smiled faintly, and he felt the tension ease just a little. When they reached her home, her mother was waiting at the gate. She looked tired, her hair tied back, eyes shadowed with worry. She had noticed the bruises on her daughter's arms, the sadness that lingered like a cloud. She had been worried for weeks, unsure how to handle the constant teasing and small attacks her daughter faced every day. And now, seeing him there, standing quietly, she felt a strange mixture of relief and suspicion.
"This is
"Him?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Yes," the girl said softly. "He helps me." The mother's eyes flicked to him, studying him. He gave a small nod, keeping his expression neutral. "I only make sure she's safe," he said simply. "That's all." The mother nodded slowly. She didn't speak for long, but something unspoken passed between them. A silent acknowledgement of his role, the beginning of trust forming in her mind as well. She knew he had done what she couldn't always do, the quiet acts of protection that mattered more than words. Days passed, and he continued to watch from the sidelines. Sometimes it was just sitting on a bench nearby while she played in the park. Other times it was walking her to school, ensuring the same children didn't follow too closely. He never demanded gratitude or recognition, only the safety of the girl he had taken notice of. Slowly, her smiles grew more frequent, her steps more confident. She had someone who cared for her well-being beyond the boundaries of family or friends. A guardian who saw her worth and refused to let harm touch her. The mother began to notice the change. She saw the difference in her daughter's demeanor. The way she spoke of small things that had once terrified her. The way she laughed more freely. She didn't fully understand who this man was or why he had taken such an interest in her daughter. But she could see the truth of his intentions in the simplest of ways. He stayed when he could have left. He faced what others avoided. He never asked for anything in return. One evening, the girl had a small crisis at school. Someone had taken her notebook, tearing out pages she had drawn. She had run out, tears in her eyes, and he had been waiting at the corner as always. He didn't say much, just handed her a replacement notebook he had bought. She had hugged him tightly, the first open expression of trust. He had smiled, a rare small smile, and said quietly, "I've got you, always." The mother watched from a distance, her heart tugging in ways she hadn't expected. The bond between them was evident, though unspoken. He was more than a stranger, more than a passerby. He was a presence that changed her daughter's life, and slowly began to change hers as well. It wasn't about heroics or grand gestures. It was about the quiet, steadfast acts of care. Standing by when no one else would, listening when others dismissed, protecting without question. The girl began to sleep better, to eat without dread, to speak with more confidence. She had someone who endured the small hits and threats that life threw her way, who absorbed them silently so she wouldn't have to. And the mother began to see him in a new light. Not just as a helper for her daughter, but as someone rare, someone whose presence carried weight and stability, someone who could not easily be dismissed. That evening, as they walked home together, the girl skipped a little, laughter spilling out. He smiled faintly, glancing at her, and then at the mother, who lingered at the gate, watching silently. She didn't yet speak, didn't yet approach him, but she understood something crucial. He was a protector, and the life of her daughter had been touched by someone she could trust, someone who had chosen to stand in the line of fire for a child he barely knew. And in that choice, the beginning of a story was written, one that would test loyalty, courage, and the bonds that form when a stranger steps in and refuses to walk away. The days that followed were not easy. The streets that had once seemed quiet now held a sense of tension, as if the world itself knew that trouble was never far from the young girl's life. School had become a minefield. Each hallway, each corner of the playground carried a risk, and though she tried to hide it, the shadow of fear lingered in her eyes. He noticed it immediately. He could see it in the way her shoulders tensed when someone passed too closely, the way her hands fiddled with her bag straps, or how she flinched at the smallest sound. He didn't overreact. He had learned long ago that fear grew when attention was drawn to it. Instead, he moved quietly in the background, watching, listening, always ready. Sometimes he would wait at the end of the street. Other times he lingered near the school gate, blending in with the parents and neighbors. He never made his presence feel like a shield she couldn't step out from under. His goal was simple. She needed to know he was there, even if she didn't fully see him. The harassment, unfortunately, didn't stop. The same group of older children found new ways to intimidate her. Notes left in her locker, whispers in the hall, pushing when teachers weren't looking. She tried to ignore them, but some days it became too much. One afternoon, she broke down in the bathroom, the sound of her crying muffled by the tile walls. That day, he had been waiting just outside the building, his eyes scanning the courtyard, and noticed her disappear into the bathroom alone. Without hesitation, he stepped closer. But not into her space. He stayed outside, listening, giving her the privacy she needed while remaining nearby. When she emerged, red-eyed and trembling, he gave her a simple nod and gestured for her to walk beside him. She did, clinging to the small thread of safety he represented. "Do you want to talk?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, but kept close, as if proximity alone was enough. They walked together in silence, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. Carrying an unspoken understanding at home, her mother began to notice the pattern. She had always been concerned about the bullying, but seeing how deeply it affected her daughter stirred something stronger: anger, worry, and a quiet gratitude toward the man who had begun to appear in their lives. He never sought recognition or reward, yet he became a steady presence, someone who could be counted on. She was cautious in her approach. She didn't know him well, but she could see the effect he had on her daughter, and that alone was enough to earn her respect. One day, the bullying escalated beyond teasing. A group of kids cornered her behind the school, trying to grab her backpack and knock it to the ground. She struggled, but there were too many, and fear threatened to overtake her. That day, he had been nearby, a few streets away, noticing the sudden change in the crowd around her. He ran without hesitation. By the time he arrived, the situation was tense. He didn't shout, didn't use force immediately. He positioned himself in a way that blocked their path, his calm but firm voice cutting through the chaos. "Step back now." Ow. The older kids hesitated. They were not sure what to make of him. He was not angry, not shouting, just there, solid and unwavering. Slowly, reluctantly, they backed away, muttering under their breath, leaving the girl clutching her bag, her breaths uneven but safe. He stayed close until she was steady, asking if she was hurt, brushing off her coat, smoothing the hair that had stuck to her damp face. From that day, the girl's trust in him deepened. She began to seek him out more, telling him small things that she had never shared with anyone else. The way the bullies laughed, the threats they whispered, and the little victories she had when she managed to avoid trouble. He listened without judgment, offering advice only when necessary, but always reinforcing that she was capable, brave, and worthy of safety. The mother watched quietly during these moments. She had never been the kind to rely on strangers, but she could not deny what she saw. Her daughter was slowly regaining her confidence, learning to navigate danger with someone she could trust by her side. One evening, she approached him cautiously, her voice careful. "I want to thank you," she said. "I don't know how to say it properly, but thank you for what you're doing for her." He nodded, keeping his response brief. "I only want her to be safe. That's all that matters." She studied him for a long moment, trying to read the quiet strength in his eyes. There was no arrogance, no desire for praise, just a determination that seemed to go beyond ordinary concern. It unsettled her slightly, yet reassured her even more. She had never seen anyone so committed to a child he barely knew. The following weeks were tense. The bullies tested boundaries more than ever, but he was always present, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. He became a shadow guardian, quiet, watchful, persistent. Some days he walked her to school, staying far enough behind to remain unseen. Other days he waited at the edge of the playground, a silent shield she could rely on without needing to ask. Each small act reinforced a bond between them that was growing stronger with every passing day. One afternoon, the bullying became personal. Someone had written cruel words on the girl's locker, targeted not just to humiliate, but to frighten her. She had been close to breaking down when he appeared, noticing the commotion from a distance. He didn't shout, didn't react impulsively. He simply stood nearby, letting his presence speak louder than words. Slowly, the other children backed away, unsure of his intentions or the limits of his patience. When it was safe, he knelt beside her, helping her clean the locker and reassuring her that it was not her fault. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "No one gets to decide how you feel about yourself." The mother was there that day, watching from afar. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a creeping sense of admiration. She realized that her daughter's safety and confidence were being restored not through fear or authority, but through quiet, consistent protection. The man had become a part of their lives, not as an intruder, but as someone who cared without asking for anything in return. Evenings were spent talking, walking, or simply sitting on a park bench. The girl shared her day, recounting small victories and lingering fears. He listened, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. The mother began to see him not just as a protector, but as someone who brought balance and reassurance into a life that had been filled with uncertainty. She began to leave small gestures of thanks, cookies left at the door, a nod of acknowledgement when they passed, but he never asked for anything, never expected recognition. His reward was the safety and growing confidence of the girl he had chosen to protect. One night, after a particularly difficult day at school, the girl had come home in tears, frustrated and scared. He had arrived shortly after, as if sensing her need before anyone else could. He sat beside her, quietly listening, offering comfort without judgment. "It's okay to feel scared," he said. "It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And you're not alone. Not anymore." The words resonated deeply. She had never felt that kind of reassurance before, never from anyone outside her family. But in his presence, fear seemed smaller, more manageable. She began to trust that someone could stand by her side, fight the battles she could not face alone, and still leave her with strength instead of dependency. Her mother, witnessing this bond, felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her was cautious. She didn't fully understand the man's life, his past, or his intentions. Yet another part of her was filled with admiration and relief. She saw what her daughter saw, a man who endured hardship for her child, who bore the weight of danger and fear silently, and who never sought to replace her, only to protect her. This realization planted the seed of something new. The mother began to observe more, to learn from him in subtle ways, to appreciate the quiet strength he brought into their lives. She started to understand that courage wasn't always loud, and protection wasn't always visible. It was in the steadfast presence, in the small sacrifices, in the unwavering support when no one else was watching. By the end of the week, the pattern was clear. He was no longer just a passerby or a quiet figure in the background. He had become part of their world, a steady anchor in turbulent times. The girl relied on him for safety, guidance, and reassurance. The mother watched, silently grateful, beginning to recognize that some people come into your life not by chance, but by the quiet insistence of care and the courage to endure when others cannot. And though the days ahead promised more challenges, more tests of patience and resilience, one truth remained unshakable. The man had chosen to stand for her, to endure the hits, and to remain when many would have walked away. That choice, simple yet profound, had already begun to change the course of their lives. The days grew longer as the seasons shifted, and with them, the challenges became more complicated. The girl had grown more confident, but that confidence brought new risks. She wanted to stand up for herself, to assert that she would not be pushed around. But the bullies adapted quickly, seeking new ways to intimidate her. Sometimes it was whispers in the hall, sometimes small pranks meant to embarrass her in front of classmates. He noticed every change in her mood, every hesitation in her step. He did not intervene in every situation immediately. He had learned that true strength was not only about shielding someone from danger, but helping them find courage within themselves. He guided her, teaching her to read the room, to notice subtle signs of trouble, and to respond in ways that kept her safe. Sometimes it was as simple as walking away at the right moment. Other times it was speaking up in a firm voice, or taking a strategic pause until help was near. One morning, as she was walking to school, she paused by a tree, brushing her hair out of her face. He had been following a few steps behind, as usual, watching the street, noticing a group of kids loitering near the gate. She sensed him behind her and turned slightly, offering a small, reassured smile. It was a smile that had grown more frequent in recent weeks, a sign of her growing trust and the bond they shared. "You're looking calmer today," he said, his voice low but warm. "I feel." "A little braver?" she replied. Her words were quiet, but there was a pride in them. It was the first time she had spoken about her own courage instead of the fear she carried. He nodded, pleased but careful not to overstate it. Bravery doesn't mean not being scared. It means moving forward even when you are. The mother had begun to notice these small changes as well. At dinner, she would ask her daughter how her day had gone. Noticing subtle shifts in tone, laughter returning in small doses, and a willingness to recount incidents without fear. She had come to respect the quiet influence of the man who had stepped into their lives, someone who guided without judgment, who protected without overstepping. One afternoon, there was a more serious incident. A new group of students had started targeting her, pushing her in the hall and blocking her way during lunch. She froze, unsure how to respond. He had been nearby, sensing the tension, and stepped forward just as the situation escalated. His presence was calm but firm, a solid barrier between her and the threat. "Back off," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made them hesitate. There was no shouting, no threat of force, but his confidence was enough to make them reconsider. Slowly, they stepped away, muttering complaints under their breath. She exhaled, relief washing over her, and he stayed with her until she was composed. These moments became lessons for her too. She began to understand that courage was not about fighting everyone at once, but choosing the right moments to stand firm, and knowing that someone would be there to support her when needed. Her trust in him grew stronger with each passing day. A bond that was no longer just about protection, but about guidance, understanding, and connection. At home, the mother began to see the changes more clearly. Her daughter was smiling more, speaking up for herself in ways she had never dared before. And yet there was a comfort in knowing that the man was still present, quietly watching over her, offering support without intrusion. One evening, she found herself watching him from the kitchen window as he walked her home, and she realized that his presence had become something she could rely on as well. Though she did not yet fully understand the depth of her feelings. One Saturday, he invited them to the local park, suggesting they take a walk together. It was not a grand gesture, just a simple outing, but it became a pivotal moment. The girl ran ahead, laughing freely, climbing the jungle gym and sliding down the slide without hesitation. He followed at a slower pace, watching her, smiling quietly to himself. The mother walked beside him, noticing the ease with which he interacted with her daughter. There was no pretense, no effort to impress, just a genuine care that radiated naturally. During a quiet moment, as they sat on a bench watching the sun dip behind the trees, the girl leaned against him, exhausted but happy. He wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders, a protective gesture that spoke more than words ever could. The mother felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of relief and gratitude she could not fully articulate. She realized that her daughter had someone she could trust implicitly. Someone who had become an anchor in a world that had often felt uncertain and unsafe. Over the following weeks, the bond deepened further. The girl began to share stories about her day, confiding in him things she had never told anyone else. Her fears, her frustrations, her small victories, all of it flowed naturally. And he listened patiently, offering advice when necessary but never imposing his views. He encouraged her to make her own decisions, to stand firm when appropriate, and to recognize her own strength. The mother, too, found herself seeking his presence, though she did not always admit it openly. There were moments when she faced her own challenges, days when she felt exhausted or overwhelmed, and she found comfort in knowing that he was there, someone reliable, someone who acted without expectation or judgment. Slowly, she began to see him not just as a protector for her daughter, but as someone who had earned a place of trust in her own life as well. One evening, a crisis occurred that tested their bond further. A group of bullies had targeted the girl in a more aggressive manner, cornering her after school and pushing her toward a deserted alley. She froze, panic rising in her chest, but before the situation could escalate further, he arrived. Without hesitation, he positioned himself between her and the group, his presence calm yet commanding. "Enough," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. The group hesitated, unsure how to respond to someone who radiated quiet authority rather than aggression. Slowly they backed away, realizing they had underestimated him. The girl clutched her bag, trembling but safe. Afterward, they walked home in silence, the girl leaning against him for support. He did not lecture, did not scold. He simply stayed close, allowing her to regain her composure. The mother met them at the door, her eyes filled with concern and a growing respect for the man who had become a constant in their lives. As the weeks passed, small moments continued to build their connection. The girl would run to him after school, excited to share her day, her achievements, or simply the mundane details that mattered to a child. He listened, offered guidance, and celebrated her successes with a quiet joy. The mother observed these interactions, noticing the subtle ways in which he influenced her daughter's growth, her resilience, and her confidence. One rainy afternoon, the girl fell on the slick sidewalk, scraping her knee. He was there immediately, helping her up, cleaning the wound, and offering comfort. She cried briefly, then smiled, feeling safe in his care. The mother, standing nearby under an umbrella, felt a surge of gratitude. She realized that his presence was more than protective, it was transformative. Her daughter was learning to navigate the world with strength, knowing she was never truly alone. By now, the bond between them was undeniable. The girl looked to him not just for safety, but for guidance, reassurance, and understanding. The mother, too, began to see him in a new light, recognizing his integrity, patience, and the quiet strength that he brought into their lives. He had earned their trust, not through grand gestures or dramatic heroics, but through consistent, compassionate action. Even in the ordinary moments, his influence was felt. Walking to school, waiting for the bus, completing homework, or simply sitting together at the park, interaction reinforced the sense of safety, stability, and care. The girl was thriving in ways that had seemed impossible just months before, and the mother could not help but acknowledge the role he had played in that transformation. One evening, as they sat together on the porch after a long day, the girl nestled close to him, tired but happy. He rested an arm around her shoulders, a protective, reassuring presence. The mother stood nearby, watching silently, feeling a mixture of emotions, gratitude, relief, and an unexpected warmth that she could not fully name. She knew that their lives had been changed by this man, not only through the protection he offered, but through the care, understanding, and quiet courage that defined him. The days ahead promised new challenges, but by now, a foundation had been laid, a bond built on trust, patience, and unwavering support. The girl had someone she could rely on, someone who had become a steady presence in a world that had often felt uncertain. The mother had begun to recognize that he was not just a protector for her child, but someone whose integrity and kindness could not be ignored. And as the evening sky darkened, the three of them sat together in quiet companionship, a sense of peace settling over them. It was the calm after a storm, but also the beginning of something stronger, a bond that would be tested. Yes, but one that had already proven its resilience. He had endured the challenges, faced the difficulties, and remained steadfast, and in doing so, he had become an irreplaceable part of their lives. The days had grown shorter, and the air carried the sharp edge of approaching winter. The girl's confidence continued to grow, yet life had a way of testing even the strongest. One afternoon, as she walked home from school, she noticed that the street seemed quieter than usual. The usual chatter of children was missing, replaced by an uneasy stillness. Something felt off, though she could not put her finger on it. He was nearby. As always, keeping a careful watch without intruding, the way he observed the surroundings had become almost instinctive, a quiet vigilance that came naturally now. The girl sensed him and glanced over her shoulder, a small smile appearing on her face despite the tension she felt. He nodded briefly, signaling that he was aware that she was not alone. It happened suddenly. A group of older kids appeared from the alley ahead, cornering her with a sudden force she had not anticipated. One grabbed at her bag, another tried to block her path. Panic surged and she froze, unsure of how to react. Her breaths came fast and shallow, her heart pounding. Before the situation could escalate further, he was there. He stepped between her and the group, his presence calm yet commanding. He did not shout or threaten violence, but the firmness in his stance made it clear he would not be ignored. "Back off," he said, his voice steady. There was no anger, only certainty. The older kids hesitated, uncertain how to respond to someone who radiated quiet authority rather than aggression. Slowly, reluctantly, they let go of her bag and backed away. The girl clutched the straps to steady herself, tears forming in her eyes from the shock of the encounter. He stayed with her, gently guiding her away from the street. "You're safe now," he said. "I've got you." The girl's mother had been following discreetly from a distance, and she arrived moments later, worry etched deep into her features. Seeing her daughter shaken but unharmed brought a rush of relief. She looked at him, gratitude and admiration mixing with a hint of unease. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here." He shook his head, brushing it off. "I only make sure she's safe," he replied. "That's all that matters." The incident left a lingering tension. That night, the girl could not sleep, reliving the fear she had felt. He stayed with her, quietly reading on the couch nearby, occasionally checking that she was breathing steadily. She drifted into sleep knowing that he would not leave, that someone was there for her no matter what. The next morning brought its own challenges. Word of the previous day's confrontation had spread through the school, and some of the older students whispered rumors and threats. The girl tried to ignore it, but anxiety gripped her once more. He noticed the hesitation in her steps, the way she flinched at sudden movements. He took her aside gently. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "What happened yesterday doesn't define you. And no matter what anyone says, I will be here, always." His words carried weight, not because they were dramatic, but because they were steady and unwavering. She nodded, drawing strength from his presence, feeling that even in the face of fear, she could rely on him. The mother noticed the change too. Her daughter's resilience was growing, but she also realized how much the man's quiet strength had contributed to it. He had become more than a protector. He was a guide, a teacher, a steady hand in a world that often seemed unpredictable. She could see it in the way her daughter walked taller, spoke more clearly, and carried herself with a quiet confidence. A week later, another incident tested them in a different way. The girl had stayed late at a local library to finish a project. She left as the sun dipped below the horizon, unaware that a stranger was following her. The streetlights flickered as she walked, and a sudden feeling of unease gripped her. She glanced around, heart racing, and then she saw him a few steps behind, scanning the path with a protective intensity. When a man stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path, her instinct was to panic. But he was there immediately, stepping forward, placing himself between her and the threat. His presence alone gave her the courage to stand firm, though fear still surged. "Go home," he said to the stranger, his voice calm but firm. The man hesitated, then slowly backed away. The girl's knees trembled, and she clutched her bag tightly. He guided her along the sidewalk, keeping close, but allowing her space to walk on her own. Once she was safe inside her home, she leaned against the door, tears in her eyes. I was so scared," she whispered. He knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to be scared," he said gently. "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't afraid. It means you don't let fear stop you. And you didn't. You kept going." The mother, witnessing the interaction, felt something shift within her. Gratitude alone was not enough to capture what she felt. There was respect, deep admiration, and an emerging recognition of his unwavering commitment. She realized that he had not only endured physical threats for her daughter, but had carried the emotional weight as well. Silently, without complaint. The following days were quieter, but the tension remained beneath the surface. The girl continued to grow stronger, but the mother began to worry about the emotional toll. She approached him one evening, hesitantly. "You're here for her all the time," she said. "And I don't know how to thank you." "How do you do it?" He shook his head, humble as always. "I don't do it for thanks," he said simply. "I do it because she deserves to be safe. That's all." She studied him for a long moment, noticing the quiet intensity in his eyes, the steady assurance in his tone. "It's more than that," she said softly. "You've become part of our lives, and not just for her. For me too." He said nothing, simply nodded, understanding without needing to speak further. The unspoken connection between them had grown stronger, built on trust, patience, and countless small acts of courage and care. A few days later, the girl faced another challenge, though smaller, yet significant in its own way. A group of classmates tried to provoke her during lunch, teasing and pushing her boundaries. She froze for a moment, but then remembered the lessons he had quietly taught her the way to stand firm. The importance of measured responses and the reassurance that she was not alone. She looked around and saw him sitting a few tables away, watching silently. That alone gave her the courage to respond calmly, refusing to be intimidated. The mother watched from a distance, amazed at the transformation. Her daughter had grown from a frightened, cautious child into someone capable of standing up for herself, guided by the quiet strength of a man who had endured hardship for her sake. She realized that his influence extended beyond mere protection. He had nurtured resilience, courage, and confidence in ways that no one else could. Even in ordinary moments, his presence was profound. Helping with homework, walking home, sharing stories about the DH interaction reinforced the sense of safety, trust, and stability. He did not demand recognition, did not seek reward. The mother understood that what he offered was far more valuable: unwavering loyalty and care, the kind that could not be measured in words. One evening, after a long day at school, the girl collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but happy. He sat beside her, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. The mother watched silently, a wave of emotion rising within her. Gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, an awareness that he had become irreplaceable in their lives. The girl spoke softly, leaning against him. "I feel safe," she said. "Even when things scare me, I feel like I can handle it with you around." He smiled faintly, gently stroking her hair. "You can handle more than you think," he said. "And even when you feel unsure, I'll be here, always." The mother felt a lump in her throat. She had seen him endure the hits, both literal and emotional, to keep her daughter safe. She had watched him give guidance, protection, and reassurance without ever asking for anything in return. And now she understood more clearly than ever why he had earned her trust, not only for her daughter, but for herself as well. The next morning brought its own quiet test. The girl was anxious about an upcoming presentation at school, worried about being judged or embarrassed. He guided her through preparation, helping her practice in a calm, patient manner. When the day came, she stood before her classmates, nervous but steady, and delivered her presentation with confidence. Afterward, she ran into his arms, proud and relieved. "You did it," he said, smiling. "See? You were ready all along." Mother, watching the scene unfold, realized that the bond between them had become something extraordinary. It was built on trust, patience, and unwavering support. It had been forged through small victories and enduring challenges, and now it had become unbreakable. That night, as they sat together on the porch, the girl sleeping peacefully inside, the mother turned to him quietly. "I don't know how to explain this," she said, "but I'm grateful. More than I can say. You've become part of our lives in a way I never expected." He nodded, keeping his response simple as always. "I only do what I think is right," he said. "You and your daughter deserve safety, care, and peace. That's all." And in that moment, the mother understood something profound. He had endured the hits, faced the dangers, and remained steadfast. He had become more than a protector. He had become a constant, a guide, and a presence they could rely on. Their lives had been changed quietly, profoundly, and permanently by someone who had chosen to stay when others might have walked away. The winter days were crisp, the sky a pale gray, and the streets lined with leaves that had fallen weeks ago. Life had settled into a rhythm, but the bond between the girl, her mother, and the man who had stepped into their lives had grown stronger than ever. The girl had changed. She walked taller, laughed more freely, and carried herself with confidence that had once seemed impossible. Yet the lessons of the past lingered, reminding them all that life could test even the strongest bonds. The mother found herself thinking more and more about the man who had become so integral to their lives. It wasn't just his presence for her daughter that mattered. It was the patience, the quiet strength, the way he had endured everything for them without ever asking for recognition. She had watched him face fear, risk his own safety, and comfort her child through moments she could not reach. Her respect had grown into admiration, and admiration had begun to evolve into something deeper, feelings she could not yet name, yet could not ignore. One evening, after dinner, they sat together in the living room. The girl was on the floor, drawing in her notebook, while he sat nearby, reviewing a few notes he had made for work. The mother watched the way he interacted with her daughter, the ease, the patience, the quiet guidance, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with comfort alone. "You've changed her," she said softly, almost to herself. He looked up, expression calm. "She had it in her already. I just helped her see it,"